Good evening, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Pilot Review Show. I am Captain Blade J52, and I am joined this week by one of my merry cohorts. We have the RP hologram dancing up a storm next to me here, Artie.
Hello!
So, we don't have a lot to get through this week as far as articles. Been one of the slower weeks, but we do have some interesting stuff for you guys. We have a bit more on what we might be getting as far as Discovery goes. But first, let's go ahead and get started with our patch notes for this week. We have our PC patch notes for the 20th. There's a few of them here. It resolved an issue which was blocking people from, or some people from spending expertise after accumulating a large amount of it. If you're somebody that played a lot of STFs or a lot of missions, you may have ran into this issue. Extended the breach event by 1 day. This was to compensate for the fact that they had to keep the servers down a lot longer than they expected. Loris now sells bridge officers to Jem'Hadar captains. So if you're looking to get bridge officers, you'll have to check that out. Resolved an issue that caused clipping when Jem'Hadar wore Iconian resistance arm uppers. Interesting. The Yamaguchi pylons no longer have a gap with the Narendra nacelles. New Orleans pylons no longer glow white from a distance. Resolved an issue that was causing the Leadfoot trait to not increase speed and turn while in slipstream. Something a lot of people had a problem with, apparently. Yeah. Resolved an issue where warp cores would sometimes have their warp speed overridden by an impulse engine that has a slower warp speed. Definitely quality of life there. The Dominion fleet support and Photonic fleet now spawn Dominion ships instead of Trueway.
Well, that one was good while it lasted.
I was not aware that was a thing.
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting thing. I knew a few people that would use it as a an RP thing, an RP item, basically. When you have the, oh yeah, they're coming in with their Cardassian ship, whatever. Oh no, the True Way attacking. Wait, is there more warping in? And then they just triggered the Photonic fleet, and there was more True Way ships for the moment. But yeah, that was it was a pretty interesting thing while it lasted. I'm happy now it's going to be more Dominion ships because, you know, obviously Dominion.
Yeah, very okay. Was not expecting that one. The Klingon version of Evaluate Cardassian Science Bridge Officer Applicant was rewarding a Klingon bridge officer on non-critical success. It will now appropriately reward a Cardassian bridge officer. So, a few quality of life things there, and a few other little bits of note, I guess, for lack of a better word, coming to mind. Say not too terribly much as far as major fixes that I see. Anything stick out to you, good sir?
Nope, just what I've already stated about the Photonic fleet.
Well, that about covers it, if I could words this evening, folks. That's kind of hard for me sometimes, apparently. But anyway, we'll have these bits of notes in our own notes and descriptions once the local version of this goes up. You can check that out. Not a lot this week, but moving right along, we actually have two bits of info. We have our Discovery, or Discover New Adventures This Fall blog, and then a brief preview of Mary Wiseman as Sylvia Tilly.
Yes, in the first blog about the talking about the new Age of Discovery stuff. It doesn't really give you too much, but it gives you a in-character view of the Federation at that point. It's somewhat of a timepiece of where you're going to be sat at when the story starts. Like, where in the series are you going to be? Are you going to be near the end, near the beginning? Are we going to see sneak peeks of season 2? We find out a little bit in this blog by what we hear, well, what we read anyway, and then the few tidbits at the bottom of where we get to meet our favorite little cadet, Tilly. And then it also talks about a little bit of the new starship that we're going to get with it. Let's see if I can pronounce this one. Matrovsky class. And it's from what I've been told, it seems to be like a very decent, tier 1 ship, as same thing like we got when we got the TOS stuff. It's just a new TOS ship to work in with the new stuff, but there's not much really big information on numbers or what exactly is going on, but it gives you a cool little tidbit of in-universe information. Now, for the sound bit that was given by Ambassador Kale on his SoundCloud account, but it was a nice little 18 seconds of a bit of a scene that we get from Tilly talking to the player character. I'll let you guys listen to that. Are we able to play it while live, or should we not do that?
I'll wait and let them do that, because I don't want to get copyrighted.
Good point. All right. The link will be provided, and you guys can listen to it yourselves and be further excited for when this comes out. But no, that's basically it. Yeah, we get a little bit tidbit information of where we're going to be in universe, as well as some character information for when we do get our new tune into that end of the universe. But we get a little bit more information on Tilly, a little bit here and there.
Yeah, so that's, I think that pretty much sums it up rather well. We've got a preview of our new Tier 1 ship that we're going to be using on our Discovery tunes. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And keep in mind, folks, as well, the closer we get to the actual release of Age of Discovery, there's going to be more information that comes to light. We're going to learn more about what we might be doing, and it'll just kind of pick up from there, I guess. But for now, that's what we have for articles this week. Like we said, kind of a slow news week in terms of articles, but that brings us to our budget build this evening. I know, hardly 10 minutes in and we're already to the budget build. Can you guys believe that?
This is like, what universe have we stepped into?
Sure as heck ain't the Prime universe. I know that. But speaking of newer stuff, I wanted to do this ship a week or two ago, but they didn't have the ship in the builder yet. Thankfully, they finally do. And for this evening for you guys, we actually have a Narendra-class support cruiser build. And this is on a 1-key budget. For our budget levels, we have the bare bones level, which is 2 million EC maximum limit. Everything else has to be free or cheap as possible. The 1 key is a variation of that, where we take the current going rate of a key and we use that to fund our build. The assumption is somehow somebody saved up a bunch of Zen, or they've acquired a key through some type of promotion. However they get a hold of it, they sell the key, and that's what they use to fund the ship. Now, a lot of people out there may not know that the original T5 Ambassador from the 3rd anniversary was actually the first ever tank ship that I flew in game, and actually the first max level ship I flew in game at the time. So, since they gave us a true T6 Ambassador this time around, as much as I love the Guardian, it just didn't have that full Ambassador feel to it. But since they gave us a true Tier 6 version of the Ambassador, I decided to go ahead and make something for my tanks out there, primarily. And I had been getting a lot of questions about this ship. Okay, with this particular BOF seating setup, what can we really do with the ship? And I'll explain where some of the confusion lied in a minute. For this particular ship, it is a 4-4 layout for your weapons. For your weapons, we have 3 of the rare resonating Tetrion beams. These are the ones with the chance damage mod from the New Link mission. And then we also have our Quantum Phase torpedo up front. The Quantum Phase torpedo in this instance plays very well with the Tetrion shield drain. Then in the back of the ship we have 3 more of our resonating beams, and then our Anti-Chronoton infused Tetrion beam, which is going to play into some set bonuses we'll look at in just a minute. Now, in case people are wondering, the chance modifier on this, in case people have always been curious as to what that does, is it actually doubles the chance for the Tetrion proc to go off. Normally you have a 2.5% chance for it to proc. The chance modifier doubles that to 5%. Then for your shields, your engines, your deflector, your warp core, we have some old favorites that we like to use here on the show. We have our Soul Defense set for our shields, our engines, and deflector. Now what is so special about the Soul Defense set is you get some nice bonuses on each of the pieces, such as a little bit of cooldown reduction, some extra defense value in some instances. But you also get, just by having 2 pieces on the ship, you get a free neutronium alloy armor's worth of resistances without actually having to slot a neutronium on the ship. So this frees that slot up potentially to go towards more offensive-based powers, perhaps a heal, or perhaps a damage negator of some type. Then the 3-piece will give you a massive AoE heal that affects you and I believe it's up to 4 other people next to you at the same time. And it can potentially heal your ship from near dead all the way back to full, depending on the ship itself. Then we have a warp core here, since the Soul Defense set does not come with a warp core, and we have our Temporal Phase Overcharged core. Now, this is one we use quite a bit here on the show because it is very hard to beat this core, in my opinion, at the budget end because of what it does. For those of you that were here for the Delta Recruitment event, the original one, or the rerun that they gave, you're familiar with the Temporal Negotiator device. This is basically that warp core's capacitor, is it cuts your bridge officer cooldowns in half while it's active. Now, one thing I did want to mention very briefly here is if you believe that your shields, your engines, deflector, all that stuff, you've got plenty of defense value in there, an option that you did have is you could swap the Soul Defense set for the 3 pieces of the Preeminent set and pick up a very nasty Tetrion boost, as well as a massive shield capacity boost. And I'll explain more on that in just a minute. For your devices, we like to think of those as personal preference. We don't like to assume what people have access to, but one we will recommend to everybody is the Subspace Field Modulator, because right now, as things sit, you come across it naturally during the leveling process, and it comes from the Skirmish mission. It'll give you basically a free neutronium worth of resistance while it's active. It does, however, debuff you for a minus 400 protonic damage resist rating, so that is something to be aware of. There's not many enemies that use it, but it is something to be cautious about. Then for your console layout on this ship, this is actually the fleet, or not the fleet, but the C-Store version of the ship. So whenever you pick up the fleet version, you'll actually have 4 science slots instead of 3. So for this version of the ship, you have 4 engineering slots, 3 science, and 3 tactical. For our engineering consoles, we'll start up here. We have our Trillium Deplating. This is from the Ragnarok mission and will give us a nice chunk of damage resistance as well as some shield capacity. It's basically a field generator and a neutronium alloy slammed into one console, so it gives a bit of both. Then we have your assimilated module. This is going to give you some crit chance and severity as well as a bit of control expertise, which is going to make it easier to keep our threat and also increase our damage. Then, to give a bit of extra power transfer to help out with our power, we have the Reinforced Armaments console. This comes from the Beyond the Nexus mission, and it gives around 53% power transfer, so it's essentially an EPS power console, and gives some nice bits to your hull. Then, for your last engineering console, is actually the one that comes with the ship itself. This is the Temporal Trajectory Shifter. And I'll pull this up in game so you guys can actually see the stats you're going to get off of it. Now, I'm in the process of actually building this ship, in case anybody's curious why it's missing shields and all that stuff, because I'm sure I'll get some guy that asks about that. But for your static stats on this console, you get 10 defense rating and 50 scientific readiness, which is the equivalent of a point in the skill tree into your science readiness. Then, what it does to your foe whenever you hit them is it does some physical damage that ignores their shields. Slows their firing speed by 33%. Their ability cooldowns get increased by 1% per second, and they eat a minus 50 resistance debuff. You, on the other hand, get a 50% firing cycle haste increase, 20% ability cooldowns, and a 50 defense rating, which is a pretty nasty thing to smack somebody with. So this is actually going to do good at filling the gap in the readiness, because normally we don't pick up scientific readiness in our skill tree. So this is one thing that's going to benefit you quite well. And we should also mention that this can be equipped on any starship. So any ship can use this console, not strictly our ambassador class. Then, for our science, see, Artie's giggling because he knows what it's going to do. Why do I get the feeling he's going to stick that on a shovel?
Yeah, I'll explain what I was going with in a bit. You keep going.
Okay, fair enough. Then for our science consoles, we have the Temporal Disentanglement Suite. This comes from our Butterfly mission. This gives a little bit of shield damage resistance. It also gives a nice chunk of shield capacity. And it also gives a boost to our critical chance and severity based on our current level of aux power, up to, I believe, a maximum of 10% chance. Or not 10% chance, but 10% severity, and I think it's about 5% chance off the top of my head.
I believe so, yes.
Anyways, we'll look at it in just a minute because we have to go over the set bonuses anyway. Sometimes I forget the exact numbers dealing with all this stuff. But there's actually the two set bonus we don't often mention, but we'll mention in just a moment because it's relevant to this build. Then we have our emitter refocuser. This comes from one of the missions in the Zinkethi arc. And the reason we're using this is, well, it boosts our Tetrions in this case. Then for our final science console, we have the Sticky Web. This is the one that lets players put up a web wall, similar to what the Tholians might do, and it gives a very hefty boost to our Tetrions, and it basically functions as a free Tetrion tactical console. And then for our tactical consoles, these are the Tetrion Pulse Generators. We pick those up from the Renegade's Regret mission or the Midnight mission. You can actually get them from either or. But that's what we have for our equipment. Now, I do want to touch base on the set bonuses for you guys really quickly, because these are some of the things that this build depends on. Okay, I was slightly off on the critical chance level on the Temporal Disentanglement, but not by much. So the critical severity you can get is 10%, the maximum crit chance you can get is 2.5, and that's when it's maxed out. Alright, now, our Temporal Disentanglement Suite is in the 2 set with our Warp Core, and in the 3 set with our Omni Beam as well. Now, we don't normally touch base on the 2 set because it usually doesn't go with the build we're trying to work with. Now, our 2 set in this case is going to give us 14.3% Tetrion damage. So that is additional Tetrion damage above and beyond what we would normally have. Then for our 3-piece, it is the Anti-Chronoton Infused Tetrion Discharge. It's a 10-kilometer sphere, 2-minute recharge. It does get buffed a bit by your long-range target sensors, weapons training, and energy weapon training. So it does Tetrion damage to enemy targets within 10 kilometers, maximum of 10. Affected targets take Tetrion damage in a 2-kilometer radius around targets, and it does ignore the shields. Damage is doubled against the heralds. Now this can be a pretty nasty blast to hit somebody with your Tetrions once it's boosted up. So that is 2 things that you have that are going to give you Tetrion damage and that you can be aware of. Now, the reason I wanted to touch base on the Preeminent set, like I had stated, was because of what it can give you for the 3 set. So you actually have 2 good options here. You can use the Standard Soul Defense set, or if you think your defense value is in order, you have the Preeminent in this case. The Preeminent set, 2- and 3-piece sets are pretty straightforward. For the 2-piece, you get 30 kinetic damage resist. For the 3-piece, you get 30 Tetrion, or 30% Tetrion damage and 40% maximum shield capacity. So, you have options here. But that's what we have for the equipment on the ship. Take a brief look at our skills. Now, our skills is our standard build that we've been using here on the show. I'm not going to go into the technical details because we have a video for that we're going to give to you guys. But for those people that just want a quick glance at it, we have 14 engineering, 14 science, 18 tactical points invested. You can see our lieutenant tier, lieutenant commander, commander tier, captain, and our admiral tier. But for those that did want the technical explanation, that is what our other video is for. Just mentioning that really quickly. Then for our specializations, we went with Intel Strategist on this one. Intel's going to give us some nice offensive capability, as well as potential threat generating ability. And then we have Strategist to kind of balance it out with some of the benefits it can give in terms of survival. Either Strategist or Miracle Worker would be a very viable choice here. Then let's take a look at our traits. Now for this particular ship, this is one of the ones where we were actually able to bring out and fill up all 4 of our starship traits, something we don't always get to do here on the show. Then for our personal space traits, we have our beam training for free beam damage. Beam barrage is our R&D crafting trait. We always assume you've leveled at least 1 R&D crafting school, and in this case we assume you've chosen beams. Elusive for free defensive value. Grace under fire for your career-specific trait. This is because the builder defaults to engineers. If you are not an engineer, swap out Grace under fire for your own career-specific trait, and this build is good to go for you. We have Fleet Coordinator for free damage based on team size. 2% minimum if it's just you. 10% maximum if it's a full team. Point Blank Shot for increased energy weapon damage the closer you are to the target, up to a certain maximum. Nanite Repair Matrix for a free heal whenever you dip below a certain point. Then we also have our Accurate to increase the accuracy of our weapons. And then our Redirected Armor Plating, which comes from the Renegade's Regret mission. If we're getting shot from the sides or behind, we get a temporary damage resistance boost, and it's a pretty substantial one too. Then for our starship traits, we'll take a look at our usual 3 first, and then we're going to look at the one that comes with the ship, because there are some notes I want you guys to be aware of with it. We have the Best Defense, which gives a whole healing buff to our attack patterns along with their normal effects. Predictive Algorithms for a bit of a damage increase and accuracy increase from Intel. Unconventional Tactics from Strategist, which gives a Category 2 15% damage boost to our Brace for Impact for a short time. Then the Big Daddy, which is History Will Remember in this case. Now what is so special about this trait is I'm actually going to hop into the game for just a moment, excuse me, to give you guys the stats. Now for tanking, this is, in my opinion, a game changer for some of you guys out there, so at least it is for me. Each time you're struck by a foe, you will get a stack of History Will Remember, up to a maximum of 30 stacks, and they last until you leave the map. So even if you drop combat, for whatever reason, you will not, and I repeat, will not lose these stacks. So that means, once you stack everything up, you're potentially looking at 30% all damage boost, that's Category 1. You're looking at 30% hull regen, 30% increased maximum hull, and 300% threat generation while in threatening stance. So if you're using the cruiser command, attract fire, and threatening stance, and this, and it's stacked up to maximum, That is 700% threat generation right there, and that's not counting any duty officers you may have boosting it as well. So that is a huge deal. Now what this means by each foe, there is a bit of a caveat to this. That's one time per foe. So if you're in an ISA run, it's one example that can have a lot of ships trying to shoot at you if you're attacking the spheres. Each one of those spheres will count for one stack. So it is possible to stack it up in missions like that, but again, it's free threat, bare minimum. So yeah, this is something you're going to want to consider if, you know, you're going to want to tank. But continuing along, we have our space reputations. We have our target systems for free crit severity. Precision for free crit hit chance. We have the Aux Power Offensive for a bit of an accuracy and damage boost based on Aux Power. And our Magnified Firepower, which is going to give us a nice chunk of Category 2 damage as a static bonus. For active reputations, we have Anti-Time Entanglement Singularity. This is a nice little AoE slow and physical damage dealt to foes. We have our Biomolecular Shield Generator. This regens shields a little bit while inside it and gives a damage reduction to them. And we have our Refracting Tetryon Cascade in this instance, which is actually going to get boosted if we're on a Tetryon build, and in this case we are. Then we have our Quantum Singularity Manipulation. This is going to increase our science stats by plus 100 for the duration and give a temporary cloaking effect. To get the best bang for your buck out of some of the abilities here, throw any exotic buffs you may have first, follow with Quantum Singularity Manipulation, and then throw an anti-time on them, and you'll get a lot more damage out of it that way. Then, finally, we come to our bridge officers, and this is where it gets kind of interesting, because I wasn't expecting a layout like this. So for this particular ship, you have a Lieutenant Commander Universal, Lieutenant Tactical, Ensign Tactical, Commander Engineering / Temp Ops, and then a Lieutenant Commander Science. Now for the Lieutenant Commander seat, we made that into a Tactical. And we have a TAC Team 1, a Delta 1, a Fire at Will 3. The Delta is going to be good if we're tanking, because that's anything that shoots us is going to eat a damage debuff. And we're going to get or a damage resistance debuff, I should say. And we're going to gain some damage resistance ourselves. Then we have a second copy of Fire at Will. This is going to allow us to use that a bit more often, and mainly because we needed something to fill the slot. Then we have Focused Assault, which is going to give some nice Category 2 damage to us whenever we attack a certain target. And then we have our Torpedo Spread 1, which is going to be for our torpedo. Then for our Commander Engineering / Temp Ops, in this instance we went with a Engineering Team 1, which is going to heal our hull, purging viral matrix effects as well. Emergency to Engines 2, to let us get the heck out of Dodge a little quicker, give some engine power. Then we have our Emergency Power to Weapons 3, that is going to give us a nice damage increase whenever we pop it, as well as some weapon power. Then we have our Reverse Shield Polarity 3, which is going to let us recharge our shields in a pinch off of incoming damage. Now you do have that as a Temp Op seat, so feel free to experiment with that. Then we have Lieutenant Commander Science, which is our Psi Team 1. It's going to purge the subnucleonic debuff and give a bit of recharge to the shields. Hazard Emitters for a heal over time, which is going to purge things like Porg Plasma Fire as well. And then finally, to round it out, is a Gravity Well, which is going to group enemies up very nicely for us. Now, total build time you're looking at for this ship is only 2 days, surprisingly, and that's mainly for our assimilated module. And that's just the 2 days to refine the dilithium, assuming only 1 tune is refining per day. But, any thoughts from you, good sir?
Okay, so I do have a few questions of variants from this build.
Okay.
So, for the specialization primary, it's on intelligence. Couldn't we use command or miracle worker instead, or is there a reason why we're using intelligence?
Well, it depends really on what you think you need more. I use intelligence in this case because it gives some nice threat boosting in this case. It gives a nice bit of damage increase. You could definitely use the Miracle Worker if you think you need more defensive value out of it, because that's going to give you more toys to play with, more heals. It really depends on the situation you're going into. Command, I don't really recommend that one, because it's not going to give you much in terms of survivability. It's not really going to give you a lot in terms of things, in my opinion, unless you're going for a torpedo build. Because it seems more torpedo-centric, and overall it's just... what it gives is... it's a situation of why just have one benefit when you can have two or more with some of the other specs. Not that the command spec isn't nice, it's just that in my opinion, the benefits that it gives are outclassed by some of the other specializations, if that makes sense.
Okay. But yeah, that was my only questions, unless you wanted to hear what I was going to do with that terrible idea with the shuttle.
Oh, good lord.
So, I've noticed that out of this ship and the previous ship that they released, which was the new version of the New Orleans, their console doesn't have a ship restriction to it. You can put it on whatever you like. So,
oh lord, I think I know where this is going.
Think of it this way, all right? You have your shuttle, which would be at least 3 console slots at most, I think. I think there's a few that may have 4, but I'm not too sure. But the average is about 3. So you have this one from the Norenda, the temporal trajectory shifter, which would, give you a good, decent chance to hammer things out as the shuttle, as you would same way with, the Norenda in this build. Then you add in the what's it called? The hyper-focusing trinary arrays from the Recon Destroyer, and that,
or Death Star laser.
The Death Star laser, yeah. And not only does it give you, the extra shield hardness and shield penetration, but it also gives you that hellacious death beam. But I feel like it could be a good combo if used together in specific instances. But for a shuttle, you have a short lifetime anyway. Run in there, do as much damage, blow up. But with these two working together, I think maybe the other various consoles that you may get from a lockbox or the C-store, like this one from a lockbox, the multi-targeting tractor arrays that you get from the Klingon Ship of the Dead, basically have that with these two. I feel like as a shuttle would do a whole lot more damage, since you're be able to hold the enemy with essentially extra tractor arrays instead of having it as an ability. Then whatever weapon system you have, you can just lay waste with what's left. But I feel like that may be an interesting build to hammer out for the next shuttle event. But for what this is going for the other ships, I feel like those two consoles may actually work very well together in a bigger picture, more or less.
Okay.
But yeah, besides that, for the build itself, very low tier but really high end stuff. I feel like it's really nice for the characters that just got this ship, spent everything on it, and we're looking for getting that Tetrion build out there. I would use it. That's great. And I already have the preeminent set, so I can use that immediately.
That you could. But anyways, that's what we have for our budget build this evening, and some definitely good ideas from our RP hologram. Was, at least for the show, the master of shuttle building. But moving on to our bugs corner. Now, I am making sure to test a lot of stuff out on Tribble for you guys. I'm trying to test out the new Tier 6 reputation stuff. But do be certain, get on Tribble, test it out. If you spot bugs, let them know. Feel free to let me know. I'll pass it along to them. I will be sure that they get it. But they don't like bugs any more than you or I do. But that's pretty much on the bug front what's going on right now. I did submit a set of notes to Ambassador Kale. I don't care to tell that on stream. And hopefully that should get things fixed for that. And launch with a lot less bugs. But moving on to our final segment of the evening, we have the RP Corner with our RP hologram. Artie, what have you got for us, dude?
Okay, so I have somewhat of an interesting perspective to go with. Most players that have been in the RP community for a long time and have seen other guilds on the other factions and whatnot, but run into a situation where you have to go player versus player. Now, depending on the game, the situation, whatever the event is, it can be easily drawn out, or, as most times I've run into, World of Warcraft. The player versus player, when you're going against two different factions or just two different guilds in general, go into a deep spiraling black hole that just loses the guild immediately. It's just what I'm going with is that this is a somewhat my version of what would be helpful for any GMs, any players out there that are looking for player versus player in the RP sense. Now, the way I've set it up in this case would be for guilds going against another guild, or inter-guild infighting or something like that. But this can be scaled down to one player versus another player. I'll get into details right now. So, to pull this off smoothly, players would be separated into personal teams, be it whatever size they have, whatever faction they are within the guild or within the bigger game in general. In this case, say, we have a guild just strictly Starfleet and another guild that's strictly Klingon. Or those two factions, whatever. And their event is going to be, their ships are going to meet up into a location and hammer it all out. Before we get to the point of both of them fighting each other to the death, we set up a preparation phase. This is maybe a week or a couple of days before the main event. You have both teams set up with whatever in-game, or not in-game, in-character items, starships, special abilities, anything that they have to use, toss it into a pile. Then they have a neutral party, which would be considered the main GM for each team, and then a neutral head GM to play as the environment and to overall see how everything will be interconnected to make sure there's no, lack for a better term, unfairness. Actually, that is the term, unfairness. But with that set up, this neutral party of the main GMs would look at all the stuff that what both teams have, but don't share it with each other, just so one team doesn't go, oh, they're using that, I have to change the plan real quick. No, unless you actually have something set up to show that you can see what they have, leave it up to the GM. They'll talk to them, they'll figure it out. But the idea is that one team will have all their stuff set up, maybe the number of ships, the type of ships, how much munitions you brought with you, any special gear, maybe you have a whole bunch of mines laid out, defense turrets, that sort of thing. So let's say the Starfleet ships or whatnot are protecting an outpost with its setup of defenses. The Klingons would have their set of defenses, their giant ships, their battleships, their wings of birds of prey, and maybe they have a super weapon of some sort. Maybe some super torpedo, an enhanced version of the Tricobalt, if we will, or something. If they have all that hammered out into detail for the GMs, the GMs in the central circle will look at it and go, alright, so we have it all the details set up, so when you use it, nobody freaks out until, maybe the other team will freak out when they see it, that sort of thing. So you still get that feel of players going, oh no, I just lost this thing, what's going on, how's this going to work out? But moving on, once we get out of this preparedness phase, we now get to the entry to the mission, into the mission. everyone brings in their chess pieces to their ends of the board, and each player will roll rolls their dice to see what their initiative would be, similar to how you would see in regular tabletop. For combat itself, that would be dependent on what your guild is set up for and all that. That's variant, but starting out with whatever initiative you go, you have your list of players on each side with whatever they roll within each other, and then you get the show on the road. Everyone goes fighting, ships blowing up left, right, and center. You get your cool tricks and moves. You get your abilities set out there for your different starships, and everything may turn out one way or another. Now, we get to this middle climactic part within the mission, which would be wherever the mission objective would be. In this case of the example, the Klingons destroying this Federation outpost. So now the Klingons are right there on the nose of this outpost. Starfleet ships are scattered, trying to take out all these other attacking Klingon ships, and the Klingons just wail on that outpost, blowing it to smithereens. Now their objective is complete. Now they have to escape the battlefield. They did their job. Now they can either destroy everyone or leave. For fairness' sake, I recommend once you complete that one objective or all your objectives, you leave, because you don't want to just completely murder an entire guild's character slots unless they said, yeah, we don't care, let's go ahead and kill our characters, we can always make new ones. Unless you have specific permission about killing other characters, I recommend don't killing anyone's character. Just leave them in the hospital for a while, if that makes sense. But now, with the Klingons trying to escape in this conflict, now the Federation ships could get the upper hand. Maybe they target the enemy flagship. Their objective would, now that they've lost their main objective, which was to protect the outpost, their secondary objective may be destroy the strongest of the Klingon ships. And if they get that done, maybe the Klingons take a Pyrrhic victory out of all this. They did their main objective, but at what cost? Once both fleets or both groups are leaving the battlefield, then you get to the point which is what I dub the RP event aftermath. This is the point where each team, players and characters, go over what damage they've had, what their NPC characters have lost, what ships have been destroyed, what abilities or other items they've used, lost, or may have not used at all, the different reinforcements that they could have brought in, that whole shebang. And maybe a little party victory or a somber funeral for defeat, or who knows, that's up to the teams themselves. But where I've mentioned the neutral party of GMs, they are to make sure this fairness keeps going. So in this case, for Starfleet versus Klingons, say the Klingons decide to use that super weapon torpedo on the outpost, and some of the Starfleet players are just suddenly going, hey, they can't use that. The GMs can now step in and go, they've had it on the list, we went into full detail, it's all good. That's within the fairness, because it was all in the preparation phase. Now, at that point, if one Starfleet player went, alright, well, I have my own doomsday weapon, and they didn't put it down on the list, that's where we get into the world of metagaming, where everyone does not want to be. The simplest form of this is that, yeah, just that doesn't happen because my character does this. Just doesn't roll very well with many people. So, basically, at that point, once you got, people trying to metagame, the GMs will have to step in and, explain why certain things happen, why, if the things were in preparation phase were there, things that weren't in preparation phase, if you were just late, maybe they can, say, all right, we'll allow this one thing within reason. Next time, just make sure you have this in our preparation phase when we're setting everything up. Because if you just suddenly go, all right, well, we call in reinforcements, and there's another 2,000 Starfleet ships at the battlefield, the GMs now have to scramble and figure out where they saw that in the notes. And the entire event sometimes stalls due to that. and you don't want the RP event to stall because then you get a lot of unhappy campers. But after that, after the aftermath, after everything's cleared up, then you guys can go on along your merry way. Everyone in the Starfleet side can go do what they need to do to rebuild, restructure everything, maybe come up with a new plan, new tactics, come up with new items to prepare for the next attack, or prepare to attack the Klingon base or whatever. And the Klingons will have to come up with their own set of things if they want to go back on the offensive or stay on the defensive due to that. So, who knows? From that point, it's very fluid with whatever the guilds and GMs want to go with. In this case, if we go for like one player versus one other player, it would be recommended to at least have a middle party to watch for fairness, because if some character decides to go, oh yeah, I can totally just cue you out of the universe with a snap of my finger, someone's going to immediately call bullshit. I'm just going to say that. But besides that, that's basically the full along of this. Make sure you have everything set up and prepared for both sides of the event. Make sure you have someone in the middle to keep a good eye on fairness, and try to have fun. There you go.
Yeah, I did not realize there was that much that went into that sort of thing. But it makes sense when you think about it. It really does.
Personally, I do feel like it would be simpler if everyone just geared out their ships to, like, since we have the in-game whatnot, the in-game PvP, might as well just gear our ships up exactly how we have it via specifications. But then, you know, you have some RPers that go, well, why can't I just use my high-end gear stuff instead of the wimpy low-tier stuff that's supposed to be on my starship for its standard build or whatever else I've added? Well, because not everyone's no one else in the guild is a DPS monger. You don't want to just immediately go in and curb stomp people just because your damn new runabout is stronger than the flagship of your guild. Oops, I would like to say, but that's besides the point.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's quite a bit of stuff to think about, and he's made my brain hurt, folks. It's not often that he does that, but he made my brain hurt this evening.
Only with RP stuff and shuttles. And this time I did both.
Yep. But anyways, folks, that's what we've got for a show this evening. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. And, like I say, kind of a slow news week for us. But, anyway, we do hope you guys enjoyed that, found it of use. But, if you guys have any requests for budget builds, feel free to let us know. We do take requests from time to time for people. If you've, let us know what kind of a ship you've got. Let us know, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. Maybe you're wanting to be a tank or a damage dealer or a science wizard. Whatever it is you're looking to do, let us know, hey, this is the ship I've got. This is the budget level I'm at. We'll hook you up with a build. If you think your gear and your piloting is in order, and you think it's, or if you think your gear and your ship is in order, I should have said, but it's your piloting that needs a little bit of work, feel free to let us know. Say, hey, can you help me improve on this? Get us a brief little video clip of your piloting so we can see where you're at, and we can offer some tips and tricks on improvement. If you have any bugs, feel free to let me know. I'll be sure to pass that along to the developers. They don't like bugs any more than you or I do, and they want to make sure things are as seamless as possible. If you got any requests for the RP Corner, feel free to let Artie know. He does take requests on that, and he might just do something over your topic. But anyways, folks, that's all for this evening, and on our way out, a good shout out to our friends over at the Temporal Armada. Be sure to check out their program. They're a very cool bunch of people. Also, be sure to check out our other good friends, the Kurt Hang Pirate Radio. Party is there. You never know what they're going to have going on over there. Always have some good music. And I do still occasionally, from time to time, have their radio program actually streaming in my TeamSpeak. But anyways, folks, that's what we have for this evening. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. For now, folks, this is the Pilot Review Show, reminding you to have your tribbles spayed or neutered. Goodbye, everybody.
See ya.